What if I told you that the biggest threat to the NATO alliance right now isn't coming from the east, but from the inside? Right now, as you watch this video, an unprecedented diplomatic earthquake is tearing through the relationship between the United States and one of its most strategic European allies, Spain. We are not talking about a minor disagreement over defense budgets or a routine political debate. We are talking about the President of the United States sitting in the Oval Office looking directly into the cameras and threatening a total trade embargo on a European nation. Why? Because Spain just did the unthinkable. They looked at the massive U.S. military machine, pointed to their highly strategic naval and air bases, and said a single word: no. Spain has officially blocked the U.S. from using its sovereign territory to launch or support military operations in the Middle East. And Washington's response? Absolute fury. Today, we are diving deep into the explosive March 2026 crisis. We'll uncover the secret history of these critical bases, why 15 American military aircraft just had to suddenly pack up and flee Europe, and why this single standoff might actually be the beginning of the end for American military dominance on the European continent. Buckle up, because the story behind the scenes is much crazier than what you're seeing on the mainstream news. To understand why Washington is losing its mind over this, you need to look at a map. Forget Germany for a second. Forget Poland. If you want to control the gateway between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, you need the Iberian Peninsula. Specifically, you need the southern region of Andalusia, Spain. Welcome to Naval Station Rota and Moron Air Base. These aren't just parking lots for planes and ships. These are the absolute crown jewels of American power projection. The U.S. has been here since 1953, back when Washington signed a historic defense pact with General Francisco Franco. For decades, if the U.S. needed to move troops, launch surveillance drones, or project devastating naval power into Africa or the Middle East, Rota and Moron were the ultimate jumping-off points. And it's not just about basic logistics anymore. Following a major NATO agreement, the U.S. recently expanded its permanent presence at Rota, bringing the total number of Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers from 4 to 6. These aren't your average ships. These maritime beasts are equipped with the state-of-the-art Aegis combat system. They are the absolute front line of Europe's ballistic missile defense. They track everything, they see everything, and they can intercept catastrophic threats before they ever reach a European city. Rota is the nerve center of this entire operation. But here is the massive catch that Washington seems to have forgotten. The U.S. doesn't own these bases, Spain does. And that minor detail just triggered the biggest geopolitical crisis of the decade. Fast forward to March 2026. The Middle East is boiling over. The U.S. and Israel are conducting heavy, highly coordinated military operations aimed at Iran. To sustain this massive logistical effort, the Pentagon desperately needs mid-air refueling tankers, supply planes, and rapid deployment capabilities. The natural choice? Moron and Rota. It's supposed to be a routine request, a simple rubber stamp from old ally. But this time, the script completely flipped. Spain is currently led by Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and a left-wing coalition that simply does not play by the old Cold War rules. When Washington called, Sanchez's government didn't just hesitate, they slammed the door shut. Sanchez stated publicly that Spanish bases cannot and will not be used for operations that violate international law or for disproportionate and unilateral attacks. His message to Washington was crystal clear: Spain will not be an accomplice to a war they fundamentally disagree with. "We say no to war," he declared, effectively drawing a massive red line in the sand. The Pentagon was stunned. Without Spanish clearance, the U.S. military suddenly had a logistical nightmare of epic proportions on its hands. Within hours, 15 U.S. military aircraft, including absolutely critical refueling tankers, had to abruptly leave Spanish soil, scrambling to relocate to alternative bases in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar. Spain had just successfully blockaded the American military machine. But if you think Donald Trump was just going to let that slide, you clearly don't know Washington. Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, the Oval Office. Donald Trump is holding a high-stakes press conference with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. But Trump isn't focused on Germany, and he certainly isn't focused on diplomatic pleasantries. He is furious about Spain, and right there, in front of the flashing cameras, he drops a nuclear bomb on transatlantic relations. Trump calls Spain a terrible ally, but he doesn't stop at verbal insults. He threatens something that allies almost never threaten each other with: a total, devastating trade embargo. Listen to these exact words. Trump said, "I told Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to cut off all relations with Spain. We are going to stop all trade with Spain. We want no business with Spain." Let that sink in for a moment. The President of the United States is threatening to economically isolate a fellow NATO member, and he followed it up with a terrifying military statement. "If we want to use those bases, we'll just fly over and use them, and nobody can tell us we can't." This is a direct challenge to the national sovereignty of a European nation. The economic stakes here are mind-blowing. Let's look at the hard numbers. In 2025, the US had a $4.8 billion trade surplus with Spain, exporting over $26 billion worth of goods to Madrid. Cutting off trade doesn't just hurt Spain, it violates international trade laws and could trigger a massive, uncontrollable economic meltdown on both sides of the Atlantic. The White House tried to spin it, of course. The press secretary came out hours later claiming Spain had received the message loud and clear and was now cooperating. But Madrid immediately fired back, stating officially that their position on the bombing of Iran and the use of their bases had not changed one single millimeter. It is total chaos. But how is the rest of Europe reacting to two of its biggest players tearing each other apart? Well, that's where things get really interesting. This crisis didn't just break the US-Spain relationship. It acted like a high-powered X-ray, revealing the massive, deep-rooted fractures hidden inside the European Union itself. Take France, for example. President Emmanuel Macron has been preaching for years about European strategic autonomy. Basically, the idea that Europe desperately needs its own military independence so it doesn't have to blindly follow America into every single overseas conflict. For Paris, Spain standing up to Washington is exactly what strategic autonomy looks like in practice. It's Europe finally finding its backbone and refusing to be a pawn in global superpower games. But then you have Germany. Chancellor Friedrich Merz sat in that Oval Office, completely silent, while Trump tore into Spain. Germany fundamentally believes that without the US military umbrella, Europe is utterly defenseless against Eastern threats. Berlin is terrified of pushing America away. But privately, they had to remind the US administration of a very inconvenient truth. The European Union is a single market. You cannot legally or practically blockade Spain without blockading the entire European Union. Inside Spain, the political landscape is just as wild. The regions around the Rota and Moron bases rely heavily on the American military for thousands of jobs and millions in local revenue. But for Prime Minister Sanchez's political base, standing up to American military dominance is a massive ideological victory. By threatening Spain with economic ruin, Trump might have accidentally made the Spanish government more popular than ever at home, uniting the country against foreign bullying. We are witnessing a historic crossroads. For 70 years, the transatlantic deal was remarkably simple. America provides the security and Europe provides the territory. But the world has dramatically changed. Europe wants American protection, but they absolutely refuse to be drawn into American wars. America, on the other hand, demands total control of the bases they operate, treating them as sovereign extensions of US power where local laws simply do not apply. These two realities can no longer exist at the same time. If the US actually pulls the trigger on a trade war, or if Spain permanently evicts American forces from the Iberian Peninsula, the NATO alliance as we know it will fundamentally fracture. The shield that has protected the West for decades is cracking, not from enemy missiles, but from political pride, shifting world orders, and a demand for true sovereignty. This crisis is unfolding right now, and the shockwaves will be felt for generations. What do you guys think? Should a sovereign nation like Spain have the ultimate right to say no to military operations they disagree with? Or does the US have the right to use the European bases they heavily fund to protect global security? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I read every single one of them. If you want to stay ahead of the curve on global geopolitics and understand the real stories behind the headlines, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.